Hello, Gunners, and welcome to Gunner Pavilion. After a statement win at the Emirates today, Arsenal 4, Aston Villa 1. That game, what a night, guys. Um, it was coming. One team was going to get it, and boy, do I love it that it was Aston Villa for a lot of reasons. Aston Villa, has been almost like a bogey team for Arsenal, and the narratives were building up. People were talking about Emery being the best manager and all of that, and I hope this really just quietens all that noise, and just puts them firmly in their place. They broke our unbeaten run. We demolished their unbeaten run in perfect style. And that game was uncomfortable. In the first half was nervy, but that's why football is a game of two halves. Second half, Arsenal absolutely turned up 4-1, and this performance was incredible in the second half, but we do have to keep it honest, and we have to talk about the nerves and what we saw in 45 minutes, because even for me, I thought, changes needed to be made. But this game had layers, it had tension, and we're going to do it properly, right? In our three ups and three downs. So let's break it down, what happened in that game and how Arsenal were so dominant. Okay, before we go into three ups and three downs in this game, let's frame this fixture for what it actually was. I wanted to check out my video on what Arsenal needs to win the Premier League. And, we talked about the framework for getting 90 points. Now, this game actually sat in the bucket of our swing games. And this is Aston Villa at home, Manchester United at home, Chelsea at home, Spurs away, and Brighton away. So Arsenal now have 45 points from 19 games. Remember, our target is 19. We're halfway through the season. Winning this game is so important because it keeps us on track. We don't have to be doing any catch up in any games, or looking at what Man City are doing. Because remember what I said, Arsenal win this league following this framework without depending on what Manchester City does. And so the target for that bucket of games was 13 points. We are on track, 4 wins and a draw. What if we actually make it 5 clean wins? That would be absolutely brilliant. Um, if we lost this game, the margin disappears. So tonight actually mattered. Now, let's talk about what happened in the game. First up for me, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Gabriel was back. And honestly, it really showed what Arsenal missed when Gabriel was away from the team. He made Arsenal look like Arsenal again. He scored the opener, he led the line, he commanded the box, and it wasn't really just about the goals. Let's look at, his contribution in that game. Villa were restricted to 3 shots on target. Arsenal considered 0 errors, leading to goals. Obviously, we'll talk about the goal that Arsenal considered later on. And the first goal that came from a corner was not random, right? Arsenal didn't have a corner leading up to that point. And the second half, we're going to talk about what happened in the second half. But for me, this game really just showed the emotional leadership that Gabriel brings. His presence calms things down. The way that we defend, the way that we communicate, when we are defending out of balls, in transition, in the rest defense phase, Gabriel is so important to Arsenal. And I know he got taken off, towards the end of the game and then eventually conceded. But I think he's so crucial to us in terms of how we actually go about this game. And initially, when the lineups came out, we're talking about Rice not being in the game, and there was real concern. But Gabriel stepped in, leadership was immaculate. He was the man of the match, for me, and it wasn't even close, right? Okay, let's talk about the second up. That second half, guys, that second half performance is probably one of the most ruthless I have seen, Arsenal. It was coming. it was coming. We were building up all these chances. You were looking at the stats, we were leaving goals on the pitch. The XG was telling us that Arsenal were creating a lot more than they were actually scoring. It was only going to be a matter of time that the team was going to get it in the nose. And boy, did Aston Villa get it in the nose. The first half belonged to Villa. Let's be clear. Villa had 53% possession in the game. They won 43 duels out of Arsenal's 38, and they hit the woodwork twice. So at full time, the XG was 3.17 for Arsenal and 2.66 for Villa. It's closer than the scoreline suggests, which actually just shows you how ruthless Arsenal was. So this wasn't about dominating football in terms of possession. It was what really happened after the break. 2 goals in 7 minutes was key to turn this game around. Gabriel's corner and Zubimendi's goal in that central run with Odegaard sliding that ball in. And it also goes to just show how Odegaard is getting back into his peak form, which we're going to need in the second half of the season. But from there on, Arsenal had 22 shots to 11 from Aston Villa, 7 shots on target to 3, 38 touches in the opposition box versus 20 for Aston Villa, and XG on target 2.98 versus 1.57. And this is what elite teams do, and Arsenal are definitely an elite team. They don't panic, they don't chase chaos, they just increase the tempo with territory and punish mistakes. We simply just overwhelmed Villa in that second half, and it was really brutal. Listen, I for one, was calling for changes to happen in the second half. Mikel Arteta made changes, but not to personnel, but actually to the structure and the tempo of the team. We started that first half losing a lot of the second balls, and I'm going to talk about that in my 3 down. But what really changed for me in the second half was we started pressing a little bit more, but we weren't just chasing those first balls. We're actually getting quicker to the second balls. And we were transitioning and passing the ball a lot quicker in the second half. That was really incredible. Third up for me, guys, the ruthlessness. That's the difference at the top. Listen, I know that this game, you can't talk about this game and the goals that were scored without really talking about Victor Gyökeres. And it's really a shame, right? Because when the goals are flowing like this, you want him to score a goal, to actually give him confidence. But there was another striker who first touch banged it in, Gabriel Jesus. He was electric when he came on. And, we we actually, when we had that spell, I think for me, it really reminded me of what Arsenal were capable of doing in that first title run that we had, and where we were actually scoring goals, from everybody, and we were so clinical. And, I hope that this is the start of a run of being clinical in front of goal. If we look at the stats, for this, the Villa goalkeeper, it was minus 1.02 in terms of goals prevented. Arsenal expected in terms of goals against was 1.41 and Villa was 0.46. And then the killer moment, guys. It was Gabriel Jesus. I've talked about it. 55 seconds, one touch, and game was done. That fourth goal was crucial for a number of reasons. Not because it was just the fourth goal of what was a convincing game at the end, but also for confidence. I think that Gabriel Jesus is a player that needs a lot of confidence. And I think this goal is going to do him a wall of good. Now, I can see him, starting, a couple of games now. And really, everyone just needs to rally around Victor Gyökeres because we're going to need him later on down the season. So let's talk about the downs in this game, because we always look at what we can improve, with every Arsenal performance. And the first for me was the first half midfield battle, guys. Villa got that absolutely to a T. And let's be honest, right? Because this is what matters. For 45 minutes, Aston Villa controlled the midfield zones. They did. And one player was at the center of this all. It wasn't Watkins, it wasn't Morgan Rogers, It was Amadou Onana. In that first half, Onana had 100% pass completion, 14 out of 14, most completed dribbles on the pitch. He had 8 possessions won, 7 duels won, 2 tackles plus 2 interceptions. This guy was really ridiculous. He was winning the ball all over the 3/3 of the pitch. So Villa weren't really lucky in that. And there was a lot of things that he was doing. He was dropping into those half spaces and into the pockets to receive the ball, but then, have the triangles to pass it on, for either Watkins, who was isolating Gabriel, at the back, or Saliba. And the first 45 minutes, that was working a treat. They were organized, they were physical, they were aggressive. And, of course, they came in prepared for the dark hours. And 0-0 for Aston Villa, at the end of the first half was an absolute win for them because their game plan was moving, and going accordingly to perfection. The turning point for me, second down, guys. Listen, this is the moment that changed everything, and it's easy to miss. And that's when Onana leaves the pitch. Let's be clear, until he left that pitch, Arsenal were really struggling for answers. And we tweaked a couple of things, in that second half, but Onana was huge. And sometimes, the luck just has to bounce, in the right place for us. And look, I don't have any sympathy for Aston Villa because we've had a gauntlet in this first half of the season with all the injuries. It's been ridiculous. One player in, one player out. So when Onana left that pitch, suddenly Villa stopped carrying the ball in the midfield. Tielemans couldn't do exactly what Onana was doing, and they lost that confidence and boldness in the middle of the park. Arsenal then starts to win the interceptions, in the midfield, and then our goals, started to spike, right? We started flooding the box, 38 touches in the box. And for Villa, that was a huge, huge blow. I'm sure a lot of Villa fans are going to be mourning about that because they lost their stabilizer in the middle of the park, and Onana was that. But for Arsenal, it's a learning moment, right? How do you deal with players like this, players like Onana, because there's going to be more of those sort of players in games to come. So, we've ended the year great, but I think that there was a lot that we can do, to improve that part of our pitch. And listen, game management still not perfect. That's my third down. When I look at this game, I would have wanted that clean sheet. I think the boys wanted that clean sheet. But we lost that bit of concentration because even at 3-0, we're still making life a little bit harder than necessary. We're still conceding quite a lot of fouls. There were free kicks that were being conceded in dangerous areas, and Villa still generated 2.66 XG. Now, goals change games now. So, of course, even though the XG suggests that Villa could score goals, but this is some of the things that we can improve on because in Champions League, even when you score 3 goals, it's never the end because teams can actually start to build confidence, especially when they get 1 goal back. So it didn't threaten the results. But like I say, against European elites, this might be something that matters. But guys, bringing everything back, right? We're 45 points halfway through the season and we're one swing game down, right? 4 to go. Villa tested Arsenal. Onana exposed, some of the fault lines that we have in our midfield, but Arsenal didn't blink. This wasn't just a win. It was a it was almost like an assessment that Arsenal needed for themselves. It was one to give them confidence in what they were doing, but actually to show them that if they keep being patient, keep doing what they're doing, the goals are going to come and the results are going to come. So, listen, if Arsenal keep playing like this, I think we're in with a chance. Like I say, there's a blueprint for this. We focus on ourselves. Next game is going to be Bournemouth away from home, and I'll be breaking that game down. So don't forget to check out, our preview for that game. But guys, it was a great night for Arsenal. Great night because it was a team in form, a team that have caused Arsenal problems in the past, and we passed the test in flying colors. Guys, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Really appreciate all of you and share this to as many Arsenal fans, as possible. Let's celebrate this big win. And then we look out, for Bournemouth on Saturday away from home, and it's more of the same. We rest up, we enjoy the new year, and then we look at 2026 for all the things that Arsenal are going to do and the good news that may be waiting for us. So I want to wish everyone a happy new year as you move into 2026, and I'll see you guys at the next Pavilion preview.